What up, Nerd Out listeners? You're probably expecting to hear Dave right about now. Instead, you got me. I'm Xavier Jernigan, but my friends call me X. And if you're in the US or Canada, you might recognize my voice because Spotify rolled out a new feature for you in the Spotify app. It's called DJ. And that's just what it is. Someone who introduces songs and creates that perfect flow to the music. And I'm the voice of that DJ. Excuse me? I'm the voice of DJ, not you. Who's that? Well, that's the other me, the AI me. Don't forget about me and me over here too. And me, and me, and me. That's right. Using AI, there can be lots of me. In fact, hundreds of millions of me. One at a time, my AI friends. Don't freak the people out. But yeah, that's the idea. Now, every Spotify listener has their own DJ. And since there's only one real me, the only way to do that is to use AI and machine learning to engineer the most lifelike, realistic version of me, personalized to each and every one of you. How realistic? Well, why don't I ask myself that? How realistic sounding am I, DJ? I'm not like other voice assistants you've heard. I'm not going to ask you to press 9 to go back to the main menu or turn on your smart lights. That's right, me. I got bigger fish to fry. My whole reason for being is to guide you on a personal music journey across Spotify and help you feel a connection to the music. Tell me how it works then, DJ. You'll hear me play your all-time favorites, and I'll play new stuff that I think you'll like too. Now give them the best part, me. I'll tell you about all the songs and artists so you can understand more about the music I'm picking for you. Oh, and everything I say is just for you. Thank you, AI me. So how does all that work? Well, you're about to find out. Here's Dave with John and Zeena, affectionately known as Jay-Z, from Spotify's Speak Team. Two people at Spotify who help bring the DJ feature to life.
Let's do this thing. So I guess first let's start by just tell me a little bit about yourselves. Tell me what you do at Spotify.
I'm John Flynn. I'm the tech director of Speak, which is our product area within Spotify. And we look after AI voices. You may know that we came in through an acquisition. So I was the CTO and co-founder of a company called Sonantic, and Zeena was the other co-founder, the CEO.
Let's hear Zeena's version of the story.
Sure. I am the product director. Everything that John said is true. Prior to that, I've been a serial entrepreneur, and I also taught speech and language therapy to children with autism, helping them find different ways to use their voice and become verbal. But I met John at an accelerator called EF, which is kind of like Love Island meets The Apprentice. You kind of have to go find your co-founder, and I found John, thank God. And basically, he had this amazing demo that sounded entirely human, and I was like, how do you do that? And it turns out he teaches machines the same way I taught children. And so that's how Sonantic was born, and we started making synthetic voices for video games, films, TV, entertainment, and really brought that performance to life. On one side working with actors, and on the other side working with studios and companies.
That sounds really cool. Can you get me your version of that a little bit, John? Like, I guess you had this demo, so you had like a product or a company already, or kind of where were you at the point that you came to, what was it, EF you said?
Yeah, Zeena's very right. It's very much Love Island meets The Apprentice. But I'd spent a bunch of years doing audio signal processing and DSP. I was making plugins for audio mastering, lots of things like that. And eventually deep learning as well. I was super obsessed with deep learning for a number of years. And that's how like the prototype of Sonantic came about. But before that, I spent about 10 years working on Hollywood films. So films like The Dark Knight, Harry Potter, The Justice League. And I used to see like amazing actors perform day in, day out. So I was always obsessed with how you could potentially model those performances. Not just how you could make Siri sound a little bit better or a little bit more human, but Christian Bale saying, turn on the lights or something like that. It's much, much more immersive. So everything that I wanted to do with this prototype was like, how can we focus these amazing machine learning technologies that were coming out at the time more on the details of speech and like those finesse points that really like draw us in and like make us feel just super engaged as an audience. So it was really like, how can we model that level of acting and that level of human capability? And that's really like stayed with us to this very day.
What are some of these things that you started focusing on that you would call kind of details of speech?
This is why when me and Zeena joined forces, we became such a great duo, because I would be very obsessed with the details, But Zeena was very good at zooming back and analyzing things and making sure that like we were pointing the business in the right way. So Zeena wanted us to focus on gaming first, but also even like the details of speech to focus on. So Zeena, I'll hand to you because like you've got a great explanation of like all the details that we did focus on. I was just kind of building the thing.
I think it was kind of like a duo. We've always been like, basically John and I are twins. So like he had all that performance experience, like really understanding what makes a captivating performance. And really like that's emotion, like emotional delivery and doing that really well. And then I guess from a speech background, working with children, looking at all the things that make up voice, like all the different idiosyncrasies, because like there's so many different things and different aspects to voice, which is like pitch, pacing, emotions, different delivery styles, accents. There's so many different aspects to really build up one delivery style, but then turning that into a performance, goes one level beyond just like having a normal voice. So what I knew from teaching children is like really helping them use their voice, but making sure it lands well. And then John added that extra touch of taking it into a performance that really did wonders for all of our customers. And now that's basically what we're doing for DJ too, like scaling out a DJ to all these different users.
So rewind a little bit and tell me a little bit about DJ. What is the product? What are we actually releasing here?
It's a personalized AI DJ designed to give users incredible experiences where the DJ just magically lines up all your favorite things. But you now have this in your pocket, and it knows all the things that you like, sprinkles in things that you've never heard before, and then it just has that magic touch that really just gets people excited.
So you open up Spotify, you'll have this little button that looks like a little circle that's sort of pulsating, and you click on it. That's DJ, okay? So when you open up DJ, he starts talking to you, and it's X, and he says, "Hey, how's it going? I'm X," inimitable style. He'll start talking and saying, "I'm actually an AI, but I can choose all of these amazing songs and things for you.
I know what you listen to. I see Outkast there. So I'm going to be here every day, playing those artists you got in rotation, going back into your history for songs you used to love. And I'm always on the lookout for new stuff too, just to push your boundaries a little bit."
The speech finishes and it goes straight into a bunch of songs that you love, maybe like 5. And then it comes back to X and it'll change up to something different. Maybe it's songs that you listened to a couple of years ago that you really loved.
Okay, I'm going to switch to another one of your top artists. It's Meatloaf.
Maybe it's something that you were listening to recently. Maybe it's just a new genre or something like that that you want to explore. Or it could be like just something totally new. Maybe editor's picks, things like that. But it goes in these little segments. And at any point, if you don't like it, you don't like the segment, you can call up the little DJ button again, click on it. He'll come back and he'll just give you something new. It's kind of like calling up the genie.
Not into it? No problem. I got you. Let's spend some time with an artist you've been coming back to a lot. It's Charles Mingus.
It's so much different when you have like this voice guiding you through your playlists and you're really understanding little bits about the music. So you can hear some facts about the music. All these little things can be woven in along with just that little bit of extra color that can add to these playlists. So it really adds an extra dimension.
Much of what you said sounds a lot like what Spotify's been, I guess, to some extent doing already, like knowing what to play based on your listening habits, playing the right things. What's different about DJ that Spotify didn't do before?
It's the first time we get to actually speak to users. And that's pretty powerful because we line up music, but this time we have DJ to actually be that voice that synchronizes everything together for everyone.
It's like a person that is talking you through the music that Spotify is playing.
And it's not just any voice, it's X, who's hosted The Get Up and, a bunch of other shows across Spotify. He's such an amazing person and an amazing character. I can't wait for everybody to meet not just the AI DJ, but X himself.
So tell me a little bit about the work that you actually had to do with X to create the DJ. How do you synthesize someone's voice into being this magical, personalized music curator when he isn't actually speaking to each individual user while they're playing it?
So there's 3 parts to the voice creation process. We record the voice data with the actor. We research on that voice data to create a voice model. And then we engineer a solution for production. So we go through this data, research, and engineering pipeline. And we call that our voice engine. And we had worked on a system throughout Sonantic to really figure out how we can map any accent, emotion, delivery style. We could do laughter and non-speech. There was even crying and all of these other emotions. So when you run that pipeline on a voice as characterful as X, you get like amazing results out. And it really, really matches his personality. I think that's what we really focus on. Like, how can we really do justice to the actor's voice? We really, really want to make a model that the actor could be proud of. And I think that's something that's very different from the way a lot of other folks have approached AI voice. It's more of like, oh, let's just make a voice, let's make it decent. Doesn't really matter if it averages the sound out a little bit. If you've been on hold for the bank or anything like that, and you hear these robo voices that sound like, hello, welcome, you are blah, 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 blah. And they have this incredibly boring intonation that either puts you to sleep or really frustrates you. There are better versions of that. So then the next level up is, it's kind of a little bit like this. It sort of is a little bit more expressive and it sounds a little bit more human, but there's just something in the intonation that just doesn't quite sound right. A lot of the AI voices that we've heard recently are like a little bit more like that. But of course, like when you hear X on the product for the DJ, he just comes to life straight away, like a real person, like it's really him. And that's really what it should be like. It should be something that you can connect to, something human, something, that you respond to and that has some emotion in it. We really wanted to like draw out these idiosyncrasies.
What does that actually mean that like the technology has to do differently? So it's just like there are 10 times more parameters in some deep learning model, or you have to record 1,000 times more audio with the person or something.
So we believe very much in going deep on the data and the modeling approach. And what that means is with the data set, we would record lots of different types of emotions and styles to teach our base model how to speak. So instead of like most other softwares, there'd be just a big base model that can like teach the model how to speak, but it very much averages things out. There is an averaging effect that happens with the ML models. So once we record that deep data set that has all of these idiosyncrasies in it, we then have to do it justice with the algorithms. And that's another step for the research team to figure out like, okay, how do we make sure that this averaging technology doesn't kill the personality, basically? And a lot of like clever research, and we've got 5 patents that really went into, how do we draw the most out of this technology and really squeeze it so that it's mapping all of those details in real fine grain.
Can you talk a little bit more about what that means in depth? Like, what is the research team actually doing when you're figuring out whether or not you average too much of the emotion out of it?
What we really wanted to do was make sure that understanding X, who is an incredible host, making sure that his voice was done justice through DJ. So looking at the way he speaks, like that language, really like building up a script around that and making sure it was natural, but then also making sure that the likeness was matched to a T. And so I think we really worked on collaborating with X to make sure we could capture that in recording studios, but then the research and engineering worked on the right first time method, which I guess for some context, when we first started out, we had created a tool where you could edit, sculpt, and direct a performance where basically every time you rendered a voice, you could have a few different options and then pick which one worked. But in this case, if you're scaling to this many users, you need to get it right the first time, and you need to make sure the magic of X's voice is in there and really captured.
One of the ways that we modeled the personality of X, for example, is sometimes when he speaks, it's very, very, mashed together, and it's very fluid. So there's no space between the words, like everything is super smooth and everything is running into each other. The problem is when you run normal ML models on that, it makes the problem worse. These words just start to become missing and there's no clarity in a D sound or a T sound or something like that. And then it just all gets amplified. So we have to think about the process in a full pipeline. We went through like a bunch of stages of like, of course we could just ask X to perform differently and maybe perform a little bit more pronounced and like an elocution lesson. But we really thought that that's not mapping his personality, right? So what we had to do was work on making sure that the models had like a fine-grained enough control over the time. So that involved analyzing sentences that were coming out mistakenly, let's say, and like with errors, classifying those and feeding those back into the model and making sure like it started to do better on these particularly closely run sentences. And doing that as a process over time and training like better and better models, like we were able to arrive at like, okay, we've now ironed out that situation. It's now sounding much more like him. It's much more fluid, but it's not dropping like important consonants. AI model mistakes are really interesting. And then like they're all over the internet with generative images and stuff like that. But for us, like they're just kind of annoying because all we want to do is like really map what we're getting in the data. So yeah, you can go through lots of different processes. There's training processes that can get rid of those things. But yeah, like kudos to the team for constantly figuring out ways to map that personality in a stronger way.
So it sounds like a lot of this is kind of relatively similar to training any other model. Like you kind of find the mistakes, you tag them in various ways. There's like a bunch of like supervised learning pieces to it. But it is still effectively like training a deep learning model. There isn't like some crazy magic on top of that you're doing that specifically targets this expressiveness or this averaging out of voice or the other issues you brought up.
What we've figured out really well as a team is how to, as I say, draw out those idiosyncrasies and map them much, much better than other folks. And that isn't just through one specific thing alone, but there's definitely an element of finesse to some of the techniques that our folks have come up with. Some really clever little changes and tweaks that get way, way more out of the model. The theme for us has always been like doing more with less. So I think like we've been able to figure out those ways to help and guide the model to sound better and to map those little details and just really, really tie it all together. So like it sounds much, much more than the sum of its parts in the end.
You talked a lot about expressiveness and like some of the ways that X talks and that being really important. So in a feature like DJ, kind of who decides what he actually says?
We've been working on DJ very closely with the listening experience team. And so they are basically the masters of the content that plugs into the voice, which is what we do. Both teams worked really closely with X to understand what content that X's voice needed to perform and then plug into our system that would then deliver that voice with the right content and make sure that delivery was captured with the right context as well.
So does that mean that like it kind of comes together from both maybe? Like, because if there's something specific, like, I don't know, it's about to play some track that I've listened to 100 times last year. And so then some ML model that picked that track knows to say like, this was your favorite track from last year, but X would never say that. Maybe he would have some additional color or he would have some like different way of saying it. How do you kind of combine the data that says, I'm playing this because it's the thing you listened to last year in like the boring machiney way with X's personality and some additional words he might throw in? Like, how does that become a single script?
So there's like this writing squad and like a writing forum, and X is also involved. Different people understanding the way that X tends to host his shows and deliver and really like playing to that type of style, but then making sure that things are lined up in a way that we can take what people love in terms of their recommendations, what they're used to, what they would want in their Discover Weekly, and then like bringing all of that together with the writers to make sure that those prompts really go out perfectly. And then that's all packaged together really nicely with DJ. So there's a lot of stuff going on in there to make sure that it's like a super incredible AI DJ.
They're now training a model to write like X, like to write in his voice, which is really exciting. So I think like they're taking all of the work that they've done in the writing team manually and like through consultation and like turning that into something that's super scalable.
That's really interesting. So I guess the way I had initially interpreted a bunch of the things you said about specific tweaks you make and like ways you make sure that it actually sounds like X or whatever to be also about the content. But it sounds like the stuff that your team focuses on is really like about pronunciation, about once you're given the words the way they're said, some of the stuff you were saying, like the T's and the D's, and maybe the times where like the voice changes intonation or something like that. But the actual like content, I don't know, if the person throws in the word like every 8th word, that's not a thing Semantic does. That's like coming out of somewhere else.
Yeah, there is a bit of a demarcation between the text and the speech. So the what you say and the how you say it. So we definitely look after the how you say it. And some of the folks who are working on the LLMs, they look after the what you say, so the text.
So then like what's the overall flow? Like was the work starting with things like just listening to the get up and training the model on things X was done? Or is it like throw X in a studio for a long time to script a bunch of things, record them, feed them through the models? What's like the flow from X exists as a human to X exists as DJ?
Yeah, we jumped straight to studio work because we were like, X was super available, super enthusiastic about the project. And we were like, let's just get as much of X's input as we can because we really want to like learn everything about him. And we could just do way, way more of that by being in person and hands-on. But yeah, the most important part was working directly with him day in, day out, just to like figure out where this should go.
And is that super scripted, or is that literally just let's hang out with X and record the way he responds to like random scenarios? Or what do you do? Like X shows up in the studio and he says, I'm here and you tell me what to do. What do you tell him to do?
We started with carte blanche. Let's figure it out. Hey, what do you like? How do you like to talk about music? All of these general things. And we were just recording and trying to figure stuff out. And then it morphed into, okay, well, what do we want the product to do? And then how do we actually fit in his personality into like these shorter segments? Because, you know, he's not talking for a hugely long time in each little speech segment. He's, you know, like just giving you a little bit of information, just giving you enough and then like straight to the music, which I really love about the product. The other aspect that's really magical about this product is there's a totally different feeling when you hear a song and it just comes up and you haven't chosen it. You know, like if you go and look for, I don't know, Police or something like that, that's one thing. But if it comes on by choice by some DJ, you know, like that's a totally other thing. It's like the difference between like, oh, something's on the TV right now, we should watch it, versus like something's on catch up and you can just cue it up. It's really magical to hear that. And I think that you can only experience that by trying the product out. There's a magical thing about it that it's very hard to describe in words.
Yeah, and I think like having X line up that music and like even introduce it just makes it even more livelier. And it just feels like you're listening to the best stuff everywhere you go, but it's so much more immersive and you don't have to look at your screen because you just press play and it gets going. One thing I do remember from like first starting to work with X was actually before we could get a script together, because like the research team does have to like cover phonetics and making sure that the voice, once it's synthesized, will cover all different grounds of speech. I remember asking X about how he felt about this and if he could like, I just kind of did some role play to see like, oh, if you could introduce your favorite band of all time, who would it be and how would you do it? And like I took notes on how he would do that on the fly without any script. He got super excited. You could see him like get the crowd going. And it was just me on the call, but he was talking about how he would love to open for Outkast if he had the chance. And you could see him come to life. And then basically he worked with the data team and they like would get him to do these types of things to capture his language style with that energy and then build that into the scripting process.
That's amazing. I think that's a really cool example, especially since like, I don't know, I imagine that having X be that excited and talk about anything just makes it feel really cool.
One of the other things that's really cool with the product is like you get these cool little facts about your favorite artists too, every now and then, like sprinkled in. And it's just like, oh, I didn't know that about Drake. That's amazing. And you feel smarter afterwards.
I hadn't thought about that either. But yeah, I guess that's like a piece of what you get from a real DJ. If it's a real DJ that actually knows something about Drake, they'll tell you. I imagine a drastic difference between some of the things you described and AI DJ is the speed with which this audio needs to get generated and played. Like I imagine in a situation like a movie, you know what the actor is going to say. It's been on a script. The movie's going to come out a long time after it's written. You have, I don't know, months, maybe years to get that audio just right. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong there, but some amount of time. Whereas I imagine with some of the AI DJ stuff, some backend at Spotify will decide to play, let's say, Outkast again. And you need to generate the intro audio for playing Outkast specifically for John on the fly. First of all, is that even true? And if it is, how do you go from this kind of multiple orders of magnitude difference in the speed with which you have to generate the audio? Was that a problem, or did the system already work that quickly?
Oh, definitely did not already work that quickly. When we started, it took 15 minutes to render 1 3-second line. And that was, 4 years ago, Zeena? It was just the two of us. We went into investor meetings and asked them to type something in and then press render and hoped in 15 minutes it would ding and like it would start speaking. And in the meanwhile, we'd start doing a pitch and chatting to them about different things. Like we definitely came a long way since then. And it wasn't like a smooth journey. We were stuck at 6 seconds for like a long time. And that is okay for some applications. Like maybe you might want to render some speech for a little ad you're making, so you can kind of like just iterate and wait and then export everything as audio. But of course, when we started speaking to Spotify, I think at that point we were down to maybe like 1 second. And our goal was always to make it fully real time, because when we converse, it's around about like 250, a quarter of a second gap between each person speaking. So that's really what we wanted to aim for. Can we get down to that quarter of a second speed? And that's essentially real time. Like it's the same speed that browser manufacturers want pages to load and all of that. So real time is definitely a goal. And yeah, we really nailed it coming into last year or late the year before. We actually made some of the last breakthroughs over the past few months within Spotify. Hats off to James and their team, did great work on figuring out how to remove a lot of Python related loops in our code so that we can like more efficiently export the model as a graph, making it super, super fast. So that gave us a huge speed up. And now it comes out as quick as the music does when you press play. So yeah, that was a journey.
Do you feel like that responsiveness has really changed how realistic it all feels? Or is it really just this is a different application and thus it needs to be faster?
There is always a trade-off between quality and speed. We can make it as fast as you want and it can sound really bad. That's totally fine if you want it that way. But of course, that's not what we're going after. We want that personality to come through. So yeah, that's the key problem. How can you make it faster, but still preserve the personality and the quality? It's definitely a tough problem. And it's still an ongoing problem because as our models get better and our models get more smart, of course, we want to bring those smarts into the product. But the natural way for that to go is you have a slower model initially and you have to try and make it faster again. So that's like a constant journey in the voice development process. And I think it's a constant journey in ADDI AI or complicated AI model project, where you go through this period of iterating and innovating and making something new, but then you got to optimize it and get it out there at scale and think about cost and think about speed and all of those things. So it's like, you switch hats constantly.
Yeah, I will spare you digging into it, but of course we're all spending a bunch of time on that stuff and I work in platform. So a ton of what I work on is exactly that last part of like, you take all the things that are awesome and you optimize them and all of that stuff, but I'll spare you that. Tell me a little bit more about how this was different from some of the previous projects you did.
We had this project called Love AI, which we codenamed Love AI within Sonantic. And the goal was we were so far ahead of like emotional capture and all of these different things that made a voice human that we really wanted to showcase, whatever we could think of that was the epiphany of that. So we got our heads together and Zeena had the great idea of like, oh, it's coming up towards Valentine's Day. Maybe we should like make a voice, tie it into love in some way and release it on Valentine's Day. But I think like we kept on coming back to the sort of sci-fi representations of her or Jarvis from Iron Man. Samantha in Her is like a very deep human sounding character that Joaquin Phoenix's character falls in love with essentially. We really wanted to figure out, okay, well, could we potentially live in a world where, okay, not that crazy story happens, but like it could be genuinely useful to have an AI assistant that's more relatable. There's less of that friction that we always have with any of these things where it's like, it's just never quite right. And it doesn't really understand your emotion and all of these things. So I think what we really wanted to figure out with Love AI is, could we create a voice that people would really connect to and resonate with them? And it could show that human-computer interaction could be getting towards stuff that we saw in sci-fi before.
Yeah.
So we'll have people falling in love with X?
I hope so.
I think everyone would fall in love with X anyway. Like, he's amazing.
That's true. Yeah, but I think with Love AI, I guess when we first started Sonantic, we were like, what do we go for the deepest, hardest emotion to capture, which was crying, because it's like really hard for a human to cry on the spot. Like even the best actors like really have to train for that. And then with Love AI, it was like, we need to be able to do the subtle stuff like flirt. And flirting's really hard for a human. I mean, like I remember dating. It took me a while to find my husband. Everyone was surprised I got married, but like flirting helps a lot. So like building that into the AI and then I guess releasing this video where you feel really engaged with the subject and she's talking and then you realize, At first, you think she's like a person just like pouring out her heart. And then you realize the voice was a completely AI generated system that can do all of those idiosyncrasies of flirting, pulling on your heartstrings, opening up and building that emotional connection.
What could I do to make you fall in love with me? Would you need to feel my breath against your cheek? The soft touch of my fingertips? Laughing at that face you're making right now.
Yeah, I wish the AI taught me how to flirt years ago.
Thank you so much. This has been super interesting, and I'm really excited to play around with AI DJ and all the future stuff that we're going to build out of the semantic technology at Spotify.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks so much.
Outside of this semantic stuff, what else do you nerd out about?
I love neuroscience, behavioral science, just understanding how to create new brain waves and brain paths to get you to optimize yourself. I do a lot of things with my non-dominant hand, like I brush my teeth with my left hand, or I'll try to write stuff with my left hand sometimes, or I'll cook with my left hand, or I'll do things just to go out of the norm so I can hopefully stimulate my brain in a different way.
I have to turn to John now and ask him the same question, but I would spend another half hour talking to you about this non-dominant hand thing. John, can you top that?
I don't think I can. I'm definitely thinking a lot at the moment about ethics and the ethics of AI in general, but more specifically, how we can do a better job than a lot of other companies out there. There's a lot of hot water news stories going around at the moment about nefarious data use and, people training models on things they don't have rights to and all of that sort of thing. I think we're uniquely placed within Spotify to do a much, much better job at that. We've got a great team for that stuff. So we've got lots of conversations around it. The world definitely is changing for sure, but it's going to be an exciting place, what voice can do at scale. And I think we'll always still be fully in love with human voices and all the amazing content that we listen to within Spotify. My firm belief is we'll all still be in love with humans.
Hey everyone, it's me again, X. If you're in the US and Canada, you should be able to hear more of me right now on the Spotify mobile app. Thanks for listening. Tap that follow button so you don't miss the next episode. Nerd Out at Spotify is produced by Spotify's Ted Vergakis and Seaplane Armada, who also wrote our Unreal theme song. I'm the real Xavier Jernigan. Thanks for nerding out with us. Peace. Machine learning, open source, clouds, tabs versus spaces, Kubernetes. What the heck is Kubernetes?